Good morning, everyone. This morning, we're joined by Marilyn McMorrow, an associate teaching professor and director of undergraduate studies in the Department of Government. She is a religious of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and has been a member of our Georgetown community for almost 3 decades. So Marilyn, thank you for taking the time to be with us, to join us in this conversation. And we're just going to jump right in. Your religious order is deeply involved in education, and your work focuses on normative and ethical issues in international politics. Could you share a little bit about the Society of the Sacred Heart, its commitment to education, and a little bit about your path here to Georgetown?
I'd be glad to. As a young person, I had no interest in being a nun or a sister, absolutely none. And because of my dad's job, it turned out we moved a lot. I went to 5 grade schools and 3 high schools, including 3 years in a row, moving across the country. And my 3rd high school was a Sacred Heart school in Atherton, California. And I was an angry 15-year-old at having had a 3rd high school in 3 years. And being told that it was good for our family didn't cut it with me very much. But it was a very different kind of place. So I can honestly say that within a year or so, I actually understood the term charism. And I understood that this group of women were trying to make known the personal love of the heart of Jesus by trying to welcome each student with as close to unconditional love as possible. And they also cultivated in us an actual life of prayer as opposed to prayers. Instead of going to a retreat where you were told about, the 6th commandment, we were reflecting on passages from scripture and people were talking to us privately. And I also understood that their approach to education was very serious. Women had to develop their intellects. They had to assume a kind of moral leadership. And it was meant to be transformational. And so once I learned more about religious orders, because I hadn't paid much attention, the Jesuits have a big role in my family history. So I knew about Jesuits, certainly. But at that time, to be honest, Jesuit colleges weren't really, not that many were available to women. And my brothers were going to the Jesuit high school in Bellarmine, et cetera. So I began to realize the close connection between the charism of the Society of Jesus and the Society of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. We're organized the same way. We are trying to find God in every culture, time, place across the globe. And all of this corresponded with Vatican II for me, which was a great opening. And it corresponded with the civil rights movement. So I think that I was drawn to the charism and I was willing to take what went along with it in terms of habit and order of day and all that, none of which interested me at all. But of course, with Vatican II, that also fell away. And I was thinking about how a lot of women left at that time. And I think some people came for kind of a monastic, ordered life. And I think others of us came for the apostolate. And so some of us were freed and some were disoriented, I think maybe looking back on it. So I've always had a very great appreciation for the charism and for that challenge of trying to love the person in front of me and challenge that person to develop his or her talents and set a very high bar of expectations. And I think I figured out pretty soon that doing one without the other, no matter which, would cause neuroses. But if you could pull off both the love and the challenge, it could be transformational. And then, of course, we're all over the world. I think we're much smaller than the Jesuits, but we are one order. We have provinces, but we are one order. We make our final vows together, et cetera. And formation internationally is part of our preparation. So I was in the Philippines and in Korea. And I think that while I was in the Philippines and that I was making my long retreat, I was trying to decide whether I should go on for a graduate degree or whether I should offer to be involved in the Philippines or any of those places. And one of the other members in my group said to me, Marilyn, you care about politics and what's going on in the world. She says, I don't care about any of that. She said, but what I don't understand is why you don't see your preoccupations as your gifts. And that was a really great gift that she gave me. So after I returned, I also ran a high school, which was very important also in Seattle, Washington. But when I was trying to decide about graduate school, I wanted to study world order studies. And I had no idea what that meant. And I was also trying to work on that with my faculty in Seattle. I used to tell them, our students know the names of the boulevards in Paris, and they don't know the countries of Asia, and we're a Pacific Rim city, you know? So I finally ended up applying to schools that focused on international relations. And I said that I wanted to be involved in the normative issues like refugees, hunger alleviation, poverty alleviation, countering nuclear weapons, et cetera. And I ended up going to a place that really allowed me to do that, which was Princeton. And even though they considered me interdisciplinary with international relations and political theory, they encouraged me to do it. So I actually had 2 first readers on my dissertation. One of them is your friend, Amy Gutman from Penn. And she also encouraged me. She said, you could go either way, but what do you want to teach? And as soon as I told her what I wanted to focus on, she said, oh, international relations. You know, but it's always been the political theory of international relations. And I also love the courses I get to teach here because I really am invited to do that. So that's how I got here. And I'm so grateful. And it is going to be 30 years next year. So,
well, we're very fortunate for every one of those 30. Now you have incredible personal experience as you have just shared,
right.
and expertise in the church's teachings in Catholic social thought.
Right.
In past semesters, you've taught a course on Catholic social thought.
Absolutely.
From your perspective, how have the teachings of Catholic social thought resonated for you in our broader Georgetown community when we consider our identity as a Catholic and Jesuit university? In what ways do these teachings intersect with our commitment to formation and to the common good?
Well, they absolutely intersect with the common good. I mean, that's a classic emphasis in Catholic social teaching. And what I find is it's an incredible set of resources for me in the courses that I teach, even when I'm teaching the secular literature of those courses. So for example, the human rights framework, you can enter from many different doors. You know, and it can be a secular door. And I do tell my students it is the moral language of the international system, sometimes used for propaganda reasons, but nevertheless, when states call each other out on norms, it's usually in the terms of human rights. So what I have found is it's really helpful for our students to know that there is a tradition there called Catholic social teaching that touches on a lot of these points. Just a couple of examples. Our students are very concerned about climate change. I have never had a class, and it isn't just in Catholic social teaching, it's in my pro seminar or any other place I teach it, that didn't respond very positively to Laudato Si. And they're not, I always have to explain what an encyclical is and what they're going to expect. And, you know, but they find some language there to help them understand why they think the international community should be doing more in response to climate change. Right now, as you know, the whole question of migration is a very tense question in American politics. And I am actually very happy to put forward the claims that the goods of the earth are intended for all the inhabitants thereof. And, you know, borders, yes, but under a social mortgage, you know, that everyone has the human right to security and subsistence, not just my fellow citizens. And even if there's resistance, I think it's part of our mission that they at least hear that tradition. As for the formation, that's an excellent question. I guess I can only think right off the top that Obviously, I teach a course in just war theory also, so it gives them tools for people. We have students that are going to be involved in policymaking in these areas. And I think some students have resonated very positively to the notion of the common good and the good of the community of communities, even though our culture stresses individual freedoms and rights, and I do bring up the tension between the two. In fact, I often tell them that I think that's the central tension between the human rights tradition and Catholic social teaching. So I'm very grateful for the reservoir of resources that it provides me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, in December 2019, in the months before we transitioned into our virtual learning and telework environment, you participated in a Georgetown conference, The Pope and the Bomb, Beyond Deterrence.
Right.
And a few years before that, you and other members of our community had an audience with Pope Francis while in Rome for a nuclear disarmament conference. Could you reflect on the nuclear disarmament movement and how you see the continuing importance of this issue in our global community?
Oh, I actually thought I was au courant in this discourse on the moral level. And I actually had worked a little bit with the bishops when the 10th anniversary of the Challenge of Peace came out. And I understood, the narrowly conditioned approval for deterrence, provided it was second strike and on the way to another form of security. But I wasn't ready for the claim that the possession of nuclear weapons, even for deterrence, is now considered morally impermissible. So that time in Rome was very important for many, many reasons. I mean, it was a highlight for one thing, and I was so proud of the students that we went with, and we also enjoyed the students from Notre Dame and Catholic who were with us. And to go to that conference and to have the Nobel Prize winner for the ICAN, the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, to have Jody Williams from the Campaign to Ban Landmines now talking about fully autonomous weapons, or she called them robot killers. To have all those ambassadors, to have Rose Gottemoeller, a wonderful colleague, who was representing NATO, had to give NATO's response, even though she's worked with the bishops forever on nuclear build down.
A proud alumna.
What?
And a proud alumna of Georgetown.
I did not know that. I have never known that.
Yes. Deputy at NATO and also a great representative of our university.
Yeah, and I met her when I was in graduate school, and I usually just see her at conferences. I never knew that. So anyway, to realize that there was not really a word about any of this in the American newspapers, to realize that the previous July, and I think I'm on top of these issues, that the General Assembly had actually passed the treaty. And I read the paper, So I had to really look very seriously at my own moral commitments, because I had been in the view of, if we got to major build down and sort of virtual zero, but not total zero, that was a doable goal. And it really helped me, though, during that conference, and what Pope Francis said to us also, it may take 100 years. That gave me the longer picture. And I loved the way they brought in Catholic social thinking strategies to explain why this changed now. Because the conditions under which the narrowly granted, moral permissibility of deterrence had so radically changed, with more and more countries having nuclear weapons, and greater and greater resistance to two-tiered state system. And, as they were saying in that, well, they also brought in the survivors, the Habukushima from Nagasaki and Hiroshima, saying, why is it that 6% of the world's population gets to decide the fate, of 7 to 8 billion people? So yeah, so I have to be called to conversion on this, but I was very grateful for that opportunity. It was amazing.
Let's talk a little bit about your teaching this semester.
Should I tell you what I said to Pope Francis?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sure.
So we didn't know if we were going to meet him in person. They told us that he would greet the dignitaries. And then it was up to the Pope how many people he greeted. He ended up greeting every single person who was at the conference. And so I was sitting there and I was thinking, I'm going to say, yo soy hermana Marilyn McMorrow, religiosa del Sagrado Corazón de Jesús, como, and then I named a couple of the Argentinian RSCJs that I knew he knew. And then I said, y entonces profesor at Georgetown. Huge smile on his face when I said that. So yeah, that was fun.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
and just so you know, the students were asking him to bless their rosaries. That didn't occur to me.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about your teaching. This semester, you've got 2 courses, Ethical Issues in International Relations, and a seminar on just war theory in the 21st century. And you teach a first semester pro-seminar for students in the School of Foreign Service called Global Pathways, Competing Visions. Share with us the kinds of questions that you're posing to your students and how they're engaging with the challenging issues presented to them in the classroom and in the world around them. And can you talk a little bit about the ideas of rebuilding and reimagining in the context of your courses and your conversations with students?
Yes, well, I'm delighted to talk about this, especially I would love to share with you the recent way I've been developing my pro seminar. In the fall convocation for the class that came in 2019, the last one that we had in McDonough, you said to the students that they were referred to as Gen Z. And you pointed out that that term has no meaning, which I agree with. It just comes after Y. And Y wasn't chosen because of the alphabet. Gen X and then Y. You know, Gen X was supposed to be, they don't care about name brands, you know, and so all of a sudden we're doing it alphabetically. And you said to them, I think your generation has to be the founders. And with all of our major institutions in crisis, religious institutions, national institutions, I just thought that that was absolutely, I couldn't have agreed more deeply with what you were saying. And I have continued to cite that to my students. And I continued it this year too. So I changed my syllabus according to what I think are the pressing issues of the day. So there was a time when I was contrasting political Islam with the liberal regime type, but also trying to remind some students from the United States that the notion of having a polity organized to carry out God's plan is not that foreign in the roots of the United States. I was trying to destigmatize some of the associations with political Islam. Well, as my students and I and others began to have more and more concerns about the foundations of our own liberal democracy, my syllabus, I began shifting it. So for the last 3 years, I've taught Madeline Albright's Fascism, a Warning, and added Politics as a Vocation, because I wanted the students to really think about the distinction Max Weber draws between the charismatic leader versus the one who's willing to do the hard work of boring wood, you know. And then for 2 years, I added, and it's not good to keep adding, something has to go. So political Islam was dropping off the chart. I added Václav Havel's The Power of the Powerless, because I always want to start with the notion they're first year students, they're just coming to Georgetown. They're coming because they want to make a positive difference. And I want them to believe that personal and collective agency is possible even in world politics. And I don't want them to think that's a naive idea they have to give up to show how sophisticated they are now that they've started studying international relations. But I have to have convincing material. Otherwise, it's wishful thinking. So anyway, this year, oh, and of course, it also occurred to me in the past few years that an entering class knows nothing about our involvement with slavery. I didn't know about it. I entered an order that was involved with slavery, and it somehow never crossed my mind. Why? I know we went to Missouri and Louisiana. How could I have not figured this out? So I have been in the process of adding the report from the working group. This year, I decided we are going to start with agency. And we started with John Lewis's Good Trouble and his manifesto that he had published the day he was buried, because he lived it for 80 years. He never fell away from the project. And then instead of going right to the next unit, I went to a new unit on how institutions can be flawed from the beginning. And I wove the structural racism right into the liberal regime type unit. And that turned out to be pretty effective. So they were reading Madeline Albright and Timothy Snyder on tyranny, 20 lessons from the 20th century, as we were going through the election, and the group stayed close. So we were meeting with Zooms. We had a spontaneous Zoom on November 7th. We had one planned, if you can believe this, for January 7th. And the evening before had been the insurrection. We had another one planned for January 20th. So it became almost impossible to separate what we were reading from what we were living through.
Sure.
And I keep telling them, you're the founding generation. Add to that the pandemic. And I think you would agree with me, the things that happened to us when between 17 and 20 form us forever. For me, it was 1968. For these kids, it's going to be 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, they're very lucky to have you. Now,
well, I'm lucky to have them.
So
yeah,
we're coming close to the closure of Lent and to preparing for the celebration of Easter. Thoughts, reflections, your approach to this moment? What are some of the ideas that are guiding you in this time?
I think that we've been in Lent for over a year. I think if there were ever a Lent when I did not need to be reminded that I'm coming from made of dust and I'm returning to dust, it was this Ash Wednesday. When I think about Easter, and I haven't been present for a liturgy since the first Sunday of Lent last year. I've done the Zoom things, but no Eucharist, no singing. But I have always loved the sentence that for a Christian, the meaning of Easter is that hope is stronger than history. And with this pandemic, with the pandemic of structural racism in our country, with the serious political crises across the planet, the meaning of Easter for the Christian is that hope is stronger than history.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, as we close, is there a message you'd like to share with our community?
I'd like to thank the administration and you for all the care you've taken. It has meant a great deal to me that I was not asked to work in dangerous circumstances. And I appreciate what the city has done, and I appreciate what Georgetown has done. And it gives me pride that we never laid anyone off. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. I'm deeply grateful to you for everything you mean to our community and for joining us for this conversation. And I wish you the very best during this holy season.
You too.
And I just want to say goodbye to everyone, and I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.